Hello everybody, hi, it's Whimsy, back to do another tarot reading for the week. I hope everybody enjoyed the vlog I did with my friend Tawny. We spent the day in West Hollywood today eating really great food, attending the Buddhist Center, and yeah, it was a good day. So I decided to throw cards for people on what the week would be that's ahead and talk a little bit about the last tarot reading and remote I did. A lot of people were upset. It seems to be the theme lately because when I remote view or when I tune in and I open my heart to the other person from a place of love, I try and get into the world as the other person sees it. It's interesting to get people's feedback about what they think about Ivanka Trump. But what I feel and what I sense when I go into her energy is that we always perceive of ourselves as on the side of the good. I don't think that we perceive of ourselves as evil, even when we're doing things we're not supposed to be doing. And I think that that's really what I feel when I go into her energy. People want to know my personal opinions about Ivanka Trump based on me personally, and I don't think it really has any relevance to the process, what I think. And my opinions would bias the message. It's not to say that Ivanka has an accurate perception of herself, but the purpose of an empathy technique like the one I use, whether it's when I'm accessing the cards or in the meditative state, is to try to the best of my ability to see how they view the world, how they, through their own lens, through their own biases, are navigating in the world. The most interesting thing I felt when I went into the Eshkaic records and did the card reading yesterday for Ivanka Trump, for me the most fascinating aspect was Donald Trump and how he had been completely disconnected from his own empathy, his own compassion, his own feminine aspect to such a degree that he had, to some extent, transferred it onto somebody else. He had transferred it onto his daughter, and in his mind, perhaps, perceives of his daughter as the feminine aspects of himself. People want to know my opinion objectively. Not that I think it has any relevance at all to the process. I think that it's a very unhealthy it's a very unhealthy dynamic, and if you, in my own personal opinion, do I think that Ivanka Trump has the skills to be head of the UN? Or no, I don't. But again, my own personal opinion about her is not relevant to the process. People get upset that I love the person whose records I'm accessing as I attempt to hear their worldview. Sometimes it is crazy, but I really don't believe that Ivanka Trump thinks that she is evil. I think that in her mind there's always a justification for why she does the things she does. And again, that's really not the purpose of the empathy technique. It's not to yell at the messenger. And I guess it just goes back to, again, trying to understand the technique that I use. The technique I use is the open heart. I lock on to my target. I'm remote viewing or locking onto the target with my heart, using my heart to navigate or lock on to the person I'm trying to access information. And from a heart to heart, once I lock onto my target, I then attempt by opening my heart to connect to the heart of the other person. And that is the technique I'm using in order to remote that person. So when I'm in that state, I'm trying as best I can to merge with the other person and have a conversation, and I'm doing it in a way where I'm listening, I'm receiving, and I'm doing it from a place of non-judgment. And yes, whoever I'm reading for, I will advocate for, because that's my job, is that I advocate for whoever hires me as a reader. So I do try to put myself in their shoes. But if people want my own personal opinion, again, I don't think it's really relevant to the process. And people say, well, you feel empathy for I lose a lot of people unsubscribe when I do these types of techniques, which is the only technique I use. I get a bunch of people who subscribe because they say, well, I like that reading. And then I do an empathic technique on somebody who is, they believe, a monster, or somebody whose politics they have a problem with. And then everybody gets mad at me and starts writing angry things, which used to bother me horribly. But now I kind of laugh because I really can relate to what people are saying. When I am when I'm just being me and I'm not working as an empath, and I'm hearing somebody like, well, Geraldo Rivera, for example, was interviewed on The View, and he was talking about how great Ivanka and Jared were, and everybody was going crazy. And I was one of the people going crazy because that's a different type of empathy than the empathy I'm doing. The empathy I'm doing is not that I think that Ivanka Trump should be in the position that she currently holds. That doesn't interest me. My own personal opinion is, obviously, I'm a registered Democrat. I'm going to want to have a democratic, progressive government, obviously. But again, it doesn't matter. That has nothing to do with the empathy technique. The empathy technique is for me to try to get in, to try and lock on to the other person. If I get hired to find out if someone's daughter's okay, or for somebody who feels disconnected from themselves and confused, and I'm trying to lock on to their authentic self because stress, life, whatever, has caused an individual to feel like I can't connect. Can you get in? That's an empath. My job is to try and get in, lock on, check in with the customer and see, am I in? And just go through the Eshkaic records and report back what I see from a loving place, from the empathic place. And it can be unnerving if you're not in that trance state. To describe the state that I get in, to help people better understand it, it's that moment when you give your heart to somebody. You give your heart to somebody and you merge with them and you let yourself love them, and then they reveal how they see the world. That's the empathy technique. And then you report back how they see the world because you have presented yourself as someone that they can trust. Then you go back and you use that awareness of the limitations of their own perceptions of themselves in order to speak to them in a way that can create mediation and help resolve conflict resolution. So this is a technique that we can all learn if we want to engage in conflict resolution, is these empathy techniques. Learning to get out of our own heads and really trying these empathy techniques to see the other side. It doesn't mean that we're going to go and become a registered Republican or something like that. People always ask the same thing. What about the children in the cages? Practically speaking, going into the energy, if you were to ask me to analyze Ivanka Trump's energy, it would be beyond her current. She doesn't have the authority, and it's beyond her. She has the president's ear to some extent, but so do generals. So did Bolton, so did Pompeo. She's just one other voice. So not to justify her past history and not to say to make any judgment at all, objectively speaking, there's only so much power she has to change, even if she wanted to change those policies. She would have to go up against current immigration. It's outside the scope of her current position. Even if she wanted to. She would be walking on eggshells if she did feel that way. Whether she feels that way or doesn't, I didn't ask. But I will say that because of the way that DC, because of the way the agencies operate, because of the amount of people that are involved in the immigration, that are involved in immigration, ICE, etc., Homeland Security, etc., etc., etc. These are firmly established. Firmly established departments of the federal government that have hundreds and thousands of people and thousands of border people and ICE people working for them. And she and Ivanka Trump works. This is not Marie Antoinette's. This is not Louis XIV's monarchy in France. This, no matter what Donald Trump wants it to be, this is a republic with lots of agencies and lots of departments and lots of laws in effect and lots of policies and lots of advisors. And as much as I'm sure she might want to believe she has that kind of power, though I don't think she does, she wouldn't be able to do that even if she wanted to. So she, whether I like her or not is immaterial. It was good to be able to be in her shoes and just see what power she does have. And she has a limited amount of power in a limited area. And so that's important to know, and it's important to see that she simply does not have the power over the president or over the current policies that I think people would like to believe she has. That's very different than saying she's a nice person or a bad person or I want to go do lunch with her. It's not relevant. None of this is relevant. None of it's relevant to the empathic technique. Whether I like her, whether I hate her, whether people know how I vote here. People know it doesn't matter to the technique. The technique is the technique. I keep saying that to people, which is that you have to, if you're using a heart-based technique and you're trying to lock onto your target by opening your heart to another heart, who they voted for in the last election is not going to be the determination. And if you're only looking at it from the perspective of your own ego and your own views politically, it will limit you as a reader because you'll be bringing your own biases in. But if you look at the process, and if you look at the process of me going in, I would invite my empaths to start to feel the subtle energy shifts that happen with readers. Because I feel the energy shift. I feel the energy shift from I, Whimsy, the ego-based Whimsy, the person that I identify with as Whimsy, has to expand to become something else in the meditative state, or even when I'm using cards to access and go in, because I use the empathic heart-centered technique, which is, again, to lock on to the target, which is a person rather than a place. If you're looking at the remote viewings that, say, the military does, or what's currently being taught, and I think it's a fine technique where you're trying to find location, the reason why I personally didn't resonate with that technique is because my way of finding my way out of the dark is that I lock onto my targets for heart to heart, and it's a person I'm trying to connect with. Sometimes when I connect to the person, say Donald Trump, I lock on and then open my heart and then send love and then see if I get a response back. I will sometimes get visions of the room, or once I did a remote viewing where I described what the private residence looked like to me in the White House to see if what I was seeing was accurate. So this is a different type of remote viewing than the traditional remote viewing. Again, this is a remote viewing technique which is heart-centered, and you would be locking onto your target first by coming from a loving place, being in a safe, loving place yourself, taking care of your needs first, right? That's that's the first phase of the technique. For people who want to learn the technique, we've put it here on the channel. And then the second technique, after you've opened your own heart and you've taken care of yourself, is to then lock onto the target of the heart of the other person. And I will say, if I don't want to go in, or, everybody hemmed and hawed for 4 months telling me they wanted me to go in and to Jeffrey Epstein's energy and Acosta's energy. And I did it, and I'll link it to this video. And it was no fun because of who I was dealing with. But it's a good example of what we can do with the meditative state, and that even somebody who objectively, when I stand back as the person who I identify with as Whimsy, and I look at Jeffrey Epstein, I think, well, that's pure evil. That is truly a pretty evil person. But that isn't where my head is at when I'm using the heart-centered technique in order to lock on to him as the target and access information. And if I were blocked like that, and I think it would be hard for me to get a good read. So there's a kind of merging between me and the other person that I'm looking into, that I still think can be a little confusing for the observer. Because I'm having a loving conversation with somebody that I'm loving, and they're telling me their deepest secrets, and nobody's fighting with anybody. And so I get why people get confused. And I'm worried about you. You like this administration? No, I don't like the administration, and I certainly don't like the administration's policies. What I'm curious about is how people do the things they do, horrible things they do, and how they justify it to themselves. And that's one of the benefits that I've gotten from using this technique. All right, so people had asked me to again throw on Jeffrey Epstein. Thanks, everybody. Making me go back into that energy. But yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll throw for the week, and we'll see if we can't see something about Jeffrey Epstein as well. But y'all know I hate to do this, right? But because you're so special, I'm going to go in, I'll check what the week looks like, and we'll see if we can see some stuff about Mr. Epstein. Let's go ahead and take a look. All right, Spirit. Tell us what's going to go on this week. What is going to go on this week? The base card, coming into power, Fool takes a leap of faith. There's going to be, this is a period that we're entering into. It's a rather interesting period where we are going to see people showing their hands. This is a time where we're going to see the New York, the New York State is going to start releasing stuff, but we're also going to see stuff coming out of SDNY. It just feels to me like stuff is going to... This is a time of confidence for the prosecution. Magician moving in with a Fool card. So we're going to start seeing people playing their hands a little bit. We're going to start seeing what they're holding. Every time I go into the meditation on Donald Trump, there's a feeling like this boat is sinking. He doesn't want to do it anymore. He seemed defeated during the parade, July 4th celebrations. It's a feeling like burned out, tired, more cups energy moving in, a desire to reach across the aisle, grieving what he has lost. Like I said, it's part of his facet. It's part of the facets of Donald Trump he doesn't lose, he simply changes his mind. That's kind of how he maneuvers his world. So it's a time of grief and compromise. The citizens' question is a volunteer question, and they're seeing if they can't get people to volunteer to answer, whether or not they can legally put it on the census as a volunteer question, which I wonder if even that's legal. This is a time where probably also we're going to hear a little bit from Nancy Pelosi regarding her decision to wash her hands of this administration, and a decision that she cannot, despite the efforts by this administration to work across the aisle, it's too little too late. You can see Nancy Pelosi's card is moving in with the Five of Pentacles, and there's an Ace of Wands sitting in the third house. Action regarding a strong female, possibly an Aries, sitting in a position of authority. I think it's Nancy Pelosi. So we're going to see Nancy Pelosi flexing her muscles. But there's also a feeling here that when people get back to work in D.C., she may, despite all these efforts of working across the aisle, there's another part of her that's given up with this president. And there's a lot about people showing their hands now, where we're going to start seeing more evidence against this administration come up. You can see the Mastery card moving in here too. So the strongest will survive. It's a feeling like the strongest will in DC will survive. The Masters will survive. The people that know what they're doing will survive. And there will be attempts to reach across the aisle, but the consequences of that are that we are moving closer to impeachment, and we're moving closer to both sides abandoning this president. In terms of Jeffrey Epstein, it goes back to that issue of him saying this hell will never end. Be sure and check out the video I shot in February. I think that he's going to be bankrupted. I think that this is going to wipe him out financially because of the legal consequences. I think that Jeffrey Epstein will have trouble making business deals with other people. I think that, as I had said before, it looks like there was a pedophile ring, that the pedophile ring went all the way from Florida to various different islands, parts of the Midwestern United States. And then I also saw it was going up and down the East Coast. So I'm just adjusting. So there were clubs and massage parlors and whatnot that were transferring children up and down the East Coast. That's what it looks like. And the feds went in. And when Acosta was involved with all of that, it looks like he was helping to cover up and make deals with Epstein, because Epstein had been bribing people of interest, politicians, judges, etc., in order to protect himself. So he was protecting himself by compromising powerful people with young girls and then filming it, documenting it, etc. And this is why Acosta was able to work out a sweetheart deal with Jeffrey Epstein. It was because Epstein had a black book with, hundreds of names of politicians and people of interest, and so in order to protect them and Epstein, he basically dangled the names, and Acosta did a deal with him to protect those people of power. That's what it looks like, and it looks like New York just arrested Epstein, and it's going to go back to charges and investigation on some of those pedophile rings, some of those clubs that are in New York, but there are some in New Jersey, and he could be extradited. He could be facing criminal charges in New Jersey, Connecticut, and go back to Florida as well. And there's some stuff that happened on some of the islands as well. So that's what I see. It's an ugly, ugly, ugly remote to go into, and it makes me angry that this investigation's been going on but NYU's been researching this for what, 17, 18, 19, 20 years, and how long it takes sometimes to see justice. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. This reading with Tarot with Whimsy, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.